I used to believe that love arrived like a miracle. Not loud, not dramatic, just gentle, like a hand finding yours in the dark. That is how he came into my life. Quietly. I met him on an ordinary day, in a place I had walked past 100 times before. The sky was dull, the kind of gray that makes everything feel unfinished. I remember thinking that day didn't deserve to become important. I was wrong. He smiled at me like he already knew me. Not in a confident way, in a careful way, as if he was afraid I might disappear if he moved too fast. "Hi," he said. That was it. Just one word. But something in my chest answered him before my mouth did. I have always been the kind of girl who feels deeply, too deeply. I notice small things, the way someone exhales before they speak, the silence between sentences, the meaning behind a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. So when he looked at me that first time, I saw more than a boy. I saw loneliness, trying not to look lonely, and I wanted to be the girl who stayed. We started talking, then texting, then waiting for each other without admitting that we were waiting. He told me about his dreams. I told him about my fears. Somewhere between midnight conversations and shared playlists, he became familiar, comfortable, necessary. He called me his safe place. I didn't know it then, but that was the first time he gave me a name that would later break me. When you're young and someone tells you that you make them feel safe, you don't question it. You don't ask what they will do once they feel stronger. You don't ask if they will still need you when the storm is over. You just open your heart and say, "I'm here." I became the girl who listened, the girl who waited for his replies, the girl who stayed up when he couldn't sleep. He had this way of sounding lost, even when he laughed. He told me he had never really belonged anywhere, that people always left, that he didn't know how to hold on to things without breaking them. I told him he wouldn't break me. I meant it. I didn't know how dangerous that promise was. We weren't official at first, just close, just more than friends, the kind of connection that doesn't have rules yet, but already has expectations. I told myself it was beautiful, that love didn't need labels, but my heart gave him one anyway. Mine. I remember the first time he touched my hand. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't bold. His fingers brushed against mine like he was asking permission from the universe. I didn't pull away, and just like that, I crossed a line inside myself that I would never be able to uncross. From that day on, I loved him in all the quiet ways. I saved his voice notes. I reread our messages when I felt alone. I made room for him in every dream I had about the future. I imagined ordinary things with him. Coffee in the mornings, arguments that end in laughter, a life that doesn't feel so heavy because we're carrying it together. I didn't fall in love. I stepped into it, carefully, completely. He told me I was different. "You understand me," he said. "No one ever has like this." And I believed that understanding someone was the same as being loved by them. I didn't see the difference yet. When he was sad, I became softer. When he was distant, I tried harder. When he disappeared for hours, I told myself he needed space. I kept choosing patience over pride, over boundaries, over myself, because I loved him, and love, I thought, was supposed to feel like sacrifice. He would call me late at night, voice low, almost breaking. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he'd whisper. I would close my eyes and let those words wrap around me like a promise. But there is a dangerous kind of closeness, the kind where you become someone's emotional home without ever being chosen as their destination. I didn't notice when the balance shifted, when my world started revolving around his moods, when my happiness began to depend on his attention, when I started apologizing for things I didn't do just to keep the peace. I thought that was love. No one teaches girls like me the difference between devotion and self-erasure. So I gave more. I gave time. I gave understanding. I gave forgiveness before he ever asked for it. I gave him the parts of me that were still healing, and he took them gently, like something fragile, like something temporary. There were moments, small ones, when doubt tried to speak to me, when he would avoid certain questions, when he'd go quiet after certain conversations, when I felt like I was always reaching for him, but he was only standing still. But every time my heart whispered, something isn't right, I told it to be quiet, because loving him felt like having a purpose, and I was afraid of who I would be without him. He told me once, "You're the only one who never leaves." I smiled when he said it. I didn't know that one day those words would feel like a warning I was too in love to understand. I didn't know that I was becoming a place he could rest, but not a place he intended to stay. Back then, I thought love meant holding on. I didn't know that sometimes love means watching someone slowly decide you are not enough, while you are still giving them everything you are. And I didn't know, not yet, that the boy who called me his safe place would one day become the reason I learned how to survive without one. There is a special kind of blindness that only love can give you. Not the kind where you see nothing, but the kind where you see everything and choose to call it something else. I didn't ignore the signs. I renamed them. I called distance space. I called silence stress. I called confusion patience. I called pain love. At first, it was small things. He would take longer to reply. Minutes turned into hours, hours into nights. I would stare at my phone, pretending I wasn't waiting, telling myself I was being dramatic, telling myself he had a life outside of me. But when you love someone the way I loved him, you don't just wait, you shrink. You make yourself quieter so you don't seem needy. You soften your questions so they don't sound like accusations. You swallow your hurt so it doesn't become an inconvenience. Sometimes he would read my messages and not answer. Seen. That word became a kind of ache. Not sharp, not loud, just heavy, like something pressing against my ribs from the inside. I would tell myself, he's busy, he'll reply later. Don't make this into something it isn't. But at night, when the world was quiet and there were no distractions left, the truth would try to speak. Why do you feel alone when you're supposed to be loved? He started canceling plans, always with reasons that sounded reasonable. I'm tired. Something came up. I'll make it up to you. And I would say, it's okay, even when it wasn't, especially when it wasn't. There were days when he was warm again, attentive, soft. Those days felt like oxygen. They made me forget the nights I cried over messages that never came. They made me believe that the distance was just a phase, that we were just complicated. But love should not feel like guessing. It should not feel like walking on glass just to reach someone who once promised they would meet you halfway. I noticed the way he stopped telling me everything, how certain stories were suddenly not important, how certain names appeared and disappeared too quickly for me to ask about them. Once I asked him gently, "Are you okay? You feel different." He smiled through the phone and said, "I'm fine. You're just overthinking again." Overthinking. That word became another weapon I used against myself. I told myself my heart was too sensitive, that my expectations were too high, that I was asking for too much. So I asked for less. I stopped questioning, stopped expressing when something hurt, stopped asking for reassurance. I became the easy girl to love, The girl who didn't demand, the girl who didn't complain, the girl who stayed quiet even when her heart was screaming. I didn't realize that in trying to keep him, I was slowly losing myself. There were moments when he felt far away, even when he was right there, when his words sounded empty, when his laugh didn't reach his eyes, when his touch felt distracted. I would lie awake at night, replaying every conversation in my head, searching for the moment when something changed. What did I do wrong? What did I say? What part of me wasn't enough? Because that's what love like mine does. It doesn't ask, "Why are you hurting me?" It asks, "Why am I not worth protecting?" I blamed myself for his distance, for his silence, for the emptiness growing between us. I tried harder. I checked in more. I encouraged him more. I loved him louder in all the ways I thought might reach him. But the more I gave, the less he seemed to need me. Sometimes in the middle of a conversation, he would suddenly go quiet. Minutes would pass, then longer, then nothing. And I would sit there, phone in my hands, feeling foolish for caring so much. When he finally replied, hours later, I would pretend it didn't hurt. "Oh, I fell asleep. Oh, I was busy." And I would respond with, "It's okay." But inside, something was breaking. Not all at once, piece by piece. The truth is, I knew. Somewhere deep inside me, I knew that the boy who once called me his safe place was learning how to live without needing me. I felt it in the way he stopped asking about my day, in the way he stopped noticing when I was quiet, in the way I was always the one reaching out. But loving him became a habit, and habits are hard to break, even when they hurt you. I was afraid of what would happen if I asked the questions I was avoiding, afraid of the answers, afraid of the silence that might follow. So I stayed. I stayed when I felt invisible. I stayed when I felt unwanted. I stayed when I felt like I was slowly becoming an option instead of a priority. Because I loved him, and because I had built a world in my mind where we survived everything. I just didn't know yet that some storms are not meant to be survived together. Some storms are warnings, and I was standing in the middle of one, calling it love, while it was already beginning to wash me away. There are moments in life that divide who you were from who you will never be again. For me, it happened on a day that looked like every other day. No storm in the sky, no warning in the air, just a normal world about to become unfamiliar. I found out about her by accident. That is always how truth arrives, isn't it? Not through confession, not through honesty, but through a crack in the story someone has been carefully telling you. A message, not even meant for me, just a name I didn't recognize, a heart emoji where my name used to be. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. My mind tried to protect me. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe I'm tired. But my hands were already shaking, because when you love someone deeply, your body knows before your heart is ready to accept it. I stared at that screen like it was a stranger wearing his face. My chest felt hollow, not heavy, not burning, just empty, like something had been taken from me without my permission. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for the world to feel real again. It didn't. I read the message again, and again, and again. Each time the truth became louder. There was someone else. Not a maybe, not a misunderstanding, not a fear, a fact. I thought of all the nights he didn't reply, all the plans he canceled, all the times he said I was overthinking. I wasn't imagining the distance. I was feeling replacement. My first instinct was to ask him, to give him a chance to explain, to tell me I was wrong, to save what was left of us. So I did. I typed his name. My fingers hesitated over the screen. How do you ask someone if they are slowly leaving you without already knowing the answer? Who is she? 3 words. That was all I could manage. The seconds after I sent it stretched into something unbearable. 1 minute. 2. 5. I stared at the typing bubble that never appeared. I already knew. But knowing something in your heart and hearing it in words are 2 very different kinds of pain. Finally, he replied, "I didn't want you to find out like this." That sentence destroyed every part of me that was still hoping. Not, "Who are you talking about?" Not, "What do you mean?" Just confirmation. There are heartbreaks that come with chaos, and then there are heartbreaks that come with clarity. Mine was the second kind. Cold, sharp, unavoidable. I remember the room suddenly feeling too small, the walls too close, the air too thin. My hands were numb. I asked him if it was real. He didn't say no. He said, "It just happened," as if betrayal were an accident, as if love were something you tripped into, as if my heart was just collateral damage in a story that wasn't about me anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to break something, but all I could do was sit there, silent, while everything I believed in collapsed inside me. He told me it wasn't supposed to hurt me, that he never meant to lose me, that he didn't plan for it to go this far. But what does that even mean? How do you fall into someone else's arms while holding mine and still claim you never meant to let me go? I asked him if he loved her. There was a pause. That pause was louder than any answer. "I don't know," he said, "but I did. You don't protect something you don't care about. You don't hide something you don't value." And he had been hiding her from me. I felt stupid, not because I trusted him, but because I trusted him more than I trusted myself. All those moments my heart tried to warn me, I silenced it. I told myself love meant patience, that doubt was weakness, that staying was loyalty. But loyalty to someone who is betraying you is just another form of self-betrayal. I asked him why. Why her? Why now? Why wasn't I enough? He said things that sounded like explanations, but felt like excuses. That doesn't change what we have. You're still important to me. I care about you. Important. Not chosen, not loved, just important. I realized something in that moment. I was no longer the girl he was afraid to lose. I was the girl he hoped would understand. And that hurt more than the betrayal itself, because it meant I was no longer his heart. I was his guilt. I didn't beg. I didn't threaten. I didn't ask him to choose me, not because I didn't want him, but because I finally understood that love you have to compete for is already lost. I told him I needed time. He said he understood, but his version of understanding had always meant, "I hope you stay quiet about your pain so I don't have to face it." That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like someone had taken a knife to my future. All the plans, all the dreams, all the some days, gone. Not with drama, with indifference. I didn't cry until hours later, when I realized that the boy who once said I was his safe place had built a new world and forgot to tell me I was no longer in it. And in that silence, in that unbearable, suffocating quiet, something inside me began to change, not into anger, not yet, into something colder, something that remembered everything I had given and everything he had taken. After I found out about her, nothing ended. Not officially. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no blocked numbers, no final arguments. Life just continued. And somehow that hurt more than if it had stopped. He still texted me, still asked how I was, still said he cared, but every word felt different now. Hollow, careful, like he was trying to keep me without losing her. I became something he wanted to hold on to without holding me. And I let him, because heartbreak doesn't make you strong immediately. Sometimes it makes you desperate, desperate to believe you still matter, desperate to feel chosen again. So I smiled when we talked. I told him I was okay. I pretended I wasn't unraveling. I cried in silence. I slept with my phone in my hand. I replayed our memories like they might change if I watched them enough times. I told myself, maybe he'll realize. Maybe this is just a mistake. Maybe I just need to wait. But every day, I felt myself disappearing. I stopped laughing the way I used to, stopped sharing the things that excited me, stopped being the girl I was before him. Because how do you stay whole when the person who once held your heart is slowly handing it to someone else? He never said, I choose her, but he didn't choose me either. And silence is a choice. One night, I asked him the question I had been avoiding. Do you still see a future with me? The pause on the other end of the line felt endless. I don't know, he said again. Those 3 words finally did what betrayal had not. They broke me. Not loudly, not in pieces anyone else could see, but inside, something collapsed so completely I knew I would never be the same girl again. I realized I was holding on to someone who was already gone. And I also realized something else. I had loved him with everything, and he had loved me only when it was easy. That night, I stopped begging the universe to give him back, and for the first time since I met him, I began listening to myself. And I believed him. But I also knew understanding too late is still losing. I asked him one question. If I had stayed quiet, if I had kept accepting less, would you have ever changed? He didn't answer. That was all I needed. I realized that he didn't lose me because he loved someone else. He lost me because he thought I would never leave. And when I did, he finally felt what I had been carrying alone. The goodbye that haunted him. The last time we spoke, I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. I was calm. And that scared him more than any argument ever could. I hope you find what you're looking for, I told him. You too, he said softly. I paused. Then I said the words that would stay with him long after I was gone. I already did. It just wasn't you. There was nothing left to say after that. No drama, no bitterness, just truth. And sometimes, truth is the most painful goodbye of all. Healing didn't feel beautiful. It felt lonely. It felt awkward. It felt like learning how to breathe in a world that no longer revolved around him. Some days I missed him. Some nights I remembered us. Some moments I wondered what might have been. But I never forgot what was. I learned that love should not make you disappear, that patience should not cost you your dignity, that choosing yourself is not selfish, it is survival. I stopped romanticizing the pain. I stopped calling endurance love. And slowly, I became someone he could never touch again. I was never weak. People think revenge has to be loud, that it has to burn, that it has to destroy. But the greatest revenge I ever took was becoming someone who no longer needed the boy who once broke her. I loved him, deeply, truly, without conditions, and that was never my weakness. It was my proof. But I also learned that love without respect is just a beautiful form of self-destruction. He taught me heartbreak, but I taught myself freedom. And if he ever thinks of me now, I hope it's not with guilt. I hope it's with understanding. That he met a girl who would have given him forever and lost her because he didn't know how to choose her when it mattered most. I am no longer the girl who waits. I am the girl who remembers, walks away, and never looks back. And that is how my story ends. Not with tears, but with strength.